You're listening to the Hazard Ground Podcast, with service members from across the military sharing their stories of combat and survival. And now, here's your host, Mark Zeno.
Welcome into the Hazard Ground Podcast. As always, we appreciate you joining us each and every week. Before we get started with this week's episode, just our usual notes to remind you of. Make sure you're following us on all the social media sites, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, at Hazard Ground Podcast. We just surpassed 1,000 followers on Instagram, so we certainly appreciate you guys following us there. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. You can go to youtube.com and just search Hazard Ground Podcast in the search bar. That's the best way to find us on YouTube. Again, just go to the search bar at youtube.com, type in Hazard Ground Podcast. You'll get all of our episodes there as well. Want to remind you guys about our promotion with Amazon. You can go to our website, hazardground.com, click on the Amazon button at the bottom of the homepage or under the sponsors tab. You do all of your normal Amazon shopping. We'll get a percentage of what you guys spend, and we donate that right back to some of the charities and organizations that have been featured here on the Hazard Ground Podcast. Please keep the listener emails coming to producer@hazardground.com. We love hearing from you guys. We love guest suggestions, so continue to send them to us. And a lot of people who write in, are wondering if they have to have this unique story or some sort of, major tale. They don't, guys. We want to tell every story or as many stories as we can. Everybody has a story to tell, and that's the purpose of this podcast, to be able to tell the stories that not many people have heard, because they are also very, very important. Finally, don't forget to leave a rating and a review on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts. Those help grow the audience. They actually help us gain more followers. So if you get a chance, leave a rating and a review. Doesn't have to be a long one. Give us as many stars as you think we deserve. Again, we welcome all the feedback from you guys, but those ratings and reviews are so important to helping grow the Hazard Ground community. Certainly appreciate you guys being part of this every single week and being part of this show. Let's get on to this week's episode. Joining us this week is a retired U.S. Army First Sergeant. He had 23 years total in the service and retired in 2012. His lone deployment was to Desert Storm back in 1990, and he is the founder of the United Heroes League, a nonprofit organization that works directly with children of military families involving youth sports. He is Shane Hudella, joining us on the Hazard Ground Podcast. Shane, welcome, brother. Thanks for being here.
Hey, thanks for having me on.
All right. Very interesting background. For hockey fans out there, this is going to be one that they absolutely love, as you have started your own hockey league and all the benefits going to military veterans. And so I think it's a fantastic cause, and certainly one that sports fans can get behind easily. But let's start back at the beginning. Shane, tell us how and why you got in the Army.
Sure. So late 1980s, getting ready to graduate high school, and my dad was a Marine, served in the Marine Corps in the Korean War, and Grandpa was in the Army in World War II, and I was part of a very big family. So coming out of high school, I had aspirations to go to college, and I wanted to carry on the military tradition in the family, and thought, hey, I'll do my part, serve in the Army, and if I get a little bit of help with college from it, boy, even better.
Now, at the time, in the late 80s, it was the most peaceful time for quite some time since post-Vietnam, right? We had about 15 years of relative peace, all things considered. Did the idea of combat ever enter your mind?
Yeah, I think I knew enough that wars happen, that conflict has happened from the beginning of time, and it'll be around until the end of time, and had familiarity with the Vietnam era, and when I was looking at entering military service, knew that that was potentially part of the deal, and was okay with that. But you're right, it was an era where just kind of coming out of the Cold War, and seemed like relatively low risk to be able to join the military and try and get an education knocked out quick. And then if I enjoyed it, I could stick around. And if I didn't, then, hey, I'd have some help with my degree and be on my way.
All right. So to that end, when you got in, did you know what you wanted to do? I mean, obviously you had the family background, but did you guys have conversations about what you wanted to do?
Yeah. As far as on the military side?
Yeah.
Yeah, so my dad was also a police officer for his adult career. He was a deputy for about 30 years, and I had aspirations of going into law enforcement as well. So it made sense to join the Army as a MP initially, and figured that would be some great background for me if I did end up pursuing a career in law enforcement. So joined in December of 1988 as an MP with the 257th MP Company here in Minnesota.
So you join the Guard, and you go through all of the basic training and everything else, and you enter into the Guard. And what is your first kind of year-like experience-wise?
Sure. So joined the Guard in December and finished out the school year. Graduated, went off and did my basic training in AIDT and got into the MP unit here in Minnesota. And it was a little different time back then.
Yeah.
Late 80s, it was just kind of the transition of the National Guard being primarily a state force, or at the very least, they hadn't been utilized at the federal level very often for quite a while, since the Vietnam era anyhow. And it was a time when, boy, the good old boys, you'd still have a beer in the field, or, it wasn't the
You still had the 3-beer lunch rule back then, right?
Yeah. So it was just transitioning from being, I guess what I would say is a little bit more of a relaxed force versus the active component, and they were just making that transition to be more like the active component. So it was unique. First year as I was doing my training and getting integrated into the Army, it was great. You're 19 years old and starting to spread your wings as a young man, and you get to go off and the cliche of getting to see the world and do things that most people don't get to do. So I fell in love with it pretty quickly. Was still pretty focused on trying to pursue a degree as well, and had enrolled in college up here. And it was interesting in 1990. I'll never forget December 4th. I got a phone call from my squad leader saying, "Hey, we're being mobilized for this thing called Desert Storm. You've got 48 hours to get your affairs in order in your life, because you have to report on December 6th to the Armory so that we can mobilize." So it was a pretty short window, and I remember December 6th was my birthday, so I spent my 20th birthday reporting for my first active duty assignment and first deployment, I guess. So it was a pretty unique time. We did I think it was 4 or 5 days at our home station, National Guard Armory, and then the irony for me is they sent us over to Fort McCoy, Wisconsin, in late December to do a 3-week train up to go fight in the desert. Well, the snow was about waist deep over at Fort McCoy at the time. It was cold as shit, and every day we scratched our heads. Hey, this is where the Army's training us in a couple of weeks to go deploy to the desert. So it was kind of a unique experience.
Well, just to back up, I always joke around because I'm still in the Guard now. I did active duty first, but everybody knows I'm still in the Guard, and I always joke around about the Guard. The great thing about it is you get to date the Army, not marry it, right? Like, it's enough just to hang on, but you don't have to really be committed to it 24/7. So the Guard brings you that sort of benefit. But when you deploy it is a marriage. It's an arranged marriage, and you're there for it for an extended period of time. So that happens to you very quickly in the Guard, and the bell rings, and we're all there to answer it. So you start going through all this train up. What are you being told as far as what your mission is? Do you even know?
The military police at the time, and I think it's still the same, had 4 primary missions. You did POW operations, you did battlefield circulation and control, physical security is the third, and then a law enforcement mission where you police your own soldiers. So as we were getting prepped to go over, the word was that we would likely be doing at least 3 of those missions, or be tasked out to do possibly all 4 of those missions during our time there. And we did. It was funny. I'll never forget. We landed in Saudi Arabia the first night. Got in the middle of the night. They pushed us into some high-rise buildings, and if I remember right, it was Kobar Towers that we went to that first night. I'm in E3 at the time. We bed down in this shelled-out high-rise and fall asleep, and about 2 hours later, my squad leader's waking me up. He's in Mach 4. There's shit blowing up outside. The SCUDs are being intercepted by Patriots, and things got very real very fast for us over there. But during the time on the ground, we did do a lot of POW operations, everything from running the POW camp to being christened Greyhound bus drivers in a matter of hours, and driving up following the infantry and armor to pick up the waves of Iraqis that were surrendering, and then transporting them back. So we did that. We did police our own soldiers at the end before we came back, and then had the pleasure of sitting in the middle of absolutely nowhere for 30 days, living in a bunker with an M60 guarding a gigantic pile of 155 shells. So I think we did end up doing all 4 of our MP missions for the 6 months that we were there.
To that end, you said you woke up to the explosions and the Scud missiles and everything else. What other sort of action did you see while you were there, if any?
Yeah, it wasn't ever in the big firefight. I feel a little weird being on the show, knowing you guys have had some real warriors on there from the Special Forces community, and some guys that have gone through some pretty serious combat. And for me, it wasn't that way. Our big encounter was Scud missile attacks, and we had that instance on the first night. It was funny. A couple days later, so our first mission when we got on the ground was to provide security at the air base that the Air Force was running all their sorties out of. The next night on the job, so to speak, we're running a checkpoint, me and an E5, and E5's in the bunker on the 60, and of course me as the E3 and the guy standing outside checking vehicles coming in, and we got scudded, and I still have this picture etched in my mind of standing out there. There weren't any vehicles coming to the checkpoint at the time. And all of a sudden I'm like, wow, there's fireworks. And the next thing I know, my E5's yelling at me, "Get in the bunker, stupid!" And it was Scuds coming in and Patriots going up, and they were kind of intercepting these things relatively close. But just the imagery and the surrealness of standing outside there, and you're coming from a few weeks earlier. You were in waist deep snow at Fort McCoy, Wisconsin, and now you're in the desert, and it kind of looks like the 4th of July, but there's a very real threat there with the Scud missiles. So that was it. That was our big thing. We had a couple of weird things with some of the POWs that we managed, and we did have some contingents of National Guard or of Republican Guard that we managed over there as POWs that were a little dicey, but no big firefights for me.
Well, to that end, I mean, did you ever feel like your life was in danger at any point?
Yeah, I mean, looking back on it even after, kind of coming out of the SCUD attacks, we had probably 30 to 45 days where SCUD attacks were pretty frequent, and they were close enough to see them and close enough to shake the buildings and the ground that you were on when those things happen. But kind of a funny story, probably the scaredest I ever was during that particular deployment was the first time that an A-10 buzzed our POW compound as part of a PSYOPs operation. Because they didn't tell us, poor saps that were working the towers or the main gate. And if you've ever had an A-10 come over you at treetop level, it sounds like the world's going to end. Now, my life certainly wasn't in danger there, but I definitely needed a new pair of BDU or DCU bottoms at that point when that thing came screaming over, because it definitely sounded like the world was ending.
How long are you there for at Desert Storm?
6 months. So it was, I think it was just a couple days under 6 months, but we ended up meeting veterans eligibility just with demob and stuff like that.
Okay. So, yeah, I mean, because it ended so quickly. You guys, I guess, were they telling you at the beginning, like, it's going to be a year long? Did you know an end date, or were you kind of surprised when they said, hey, we're going home?
Yeah, it was amazing that it was done so fast, right? And always a little bit of guilt now, and that a lot of other folks I served with have gone on deployments of a year or more. We even had a historic deployment for the Minnesota National Guard where that particular brigade combat team was gone for, I think it was 23 months, 22 months, something like that. So we got over there. Obviously, the war was over pretty quick. And then we kind of had a moving target. Originally, it looked like we were going to be heading home in March, and then it was April, and then it was early May, and then I think we ended up coming home right at the end of May. So I think we got over there a couple days before the first of the year, January of 91, and I think we came home kind of towards the end of May in 91.
When you get back, do you think that would be your only deployment? Like, I mean, do you not know what's next? Were you somebody who said, okay, I'm going to get out now? Did you feel like you wanted to stay in longer? I mean, what are you thinking and feeling after that deployment?
Yeah, coming home, there was such a resurgence of patriotism in America. Every soldier, airman, Marine, sailor coming home got the parade, right? And there was just this mass patriotic movement in America that I felt like, and rightfully so. We went over there, we kicked ass, we got done, and we came home. So by the time that I was coming home and reintegrating back and into late 1991, at that point, I knew, man, I love this Army stuff. It's fun. You get to do things that people don't get to do. You feel good about defending our nation and being someone that can answer the call of duty to keep people safe for all of those people that can't join or aren't able to serve. So by late 91, I knew I was going to be in for the long haul, and knew, hey, if we have to deploy again, that's the way it goes. Now, saying that, my exposure to deployments at that point had been, geez, they're 6 months and we kick ass right away and come home, and geez, they must all be like that. So obviously it doesn't work like that. A lot of deployments are pretty extended time, and we've been kind of bogged down in the Middle East for a while now, doing great things. But I knew it was going to be a career for me.
Where were you on 9/11?
So 9/11, I was sitting at Camp Ripley, Minnesota. We were up there for senior leaders conference, and we were actually sitting, a bunch of us NCOs sitting in a big auditorium because our state adjutant general was coming in to do a smile and wave welcome to this training exercise thing. And at that time, we didn't have smartphones. We were just there on duty waiting for the adjutant general, and I'll never forget this either. He walked in his flight suit, which we thought was weird. You typically didn't see the tag in a combat uniform in Minnesota. So he walked in his flight suit, came up to the podium and said, "Ladies and gentlemen, I don't know if you're aware, but America's under attack right now. You're going to need to return to your duty stations." And he turned around and walked off the podium and out the door, and instantly everyone kind of got up as soon as the adjutant general left and hustled out to the atrium where they had some TVs and flipped on, and we all kind of watched it unfold for a bit before we scurried back to our duty stations.
So you didn't actually see anything on TV happening?
Oh, we did. Yeah,
okay.
we turned on. They had cable at this facility that we were at on Camp Ripley, and so we saw that the planes had hit the towers, and we're kind of watching in amazement at what was unfolding in front of us live on TV.
Okay. And so at that point, did you think that you guys were going to end up going somewhere again?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, absolutely. Everyone in the group, all these NCOs were like, well, it's time to head back, pack our shit, because we're going to be heading somewhere super, super soon.
And why didn't you?
At that time, so I was in the artillery at that point. In the early mid 90s, the National Guard and Army Reserve kind of reorganized some of our reserve forces in the United States, and they had came to our unit and said, "Hey, you guys are going to be artillery now. And if you want to stay in MP, we'll move you to somewhere else in the state, or you can stay here and learn artillery." So I had stuck around and thought artillery sounded fun. But it was funny for 10 years after 9/11, my unit kept getting missed. A couple of years went by right after 9/11, and other units were being taken for deployment rotations, and ours wasn't. And I continued to advance in rank, so I was a E8 at our cannon battery. I was an E7. I got selected for E8, but I had to move to DeVarty, or the Division Artillery, with the promotion. So I took the promotion to E8, moved to DeVarty. A couple months later, the unit that I was in got tapped for deployment. So I was at DeVarty for a couple of years. Did my thing as the first sergeant there. Ended up getting offered an AGR gig that I accepted. Left DeVarty, took the AGR gig, and a couple months later, DeVarty got tapped to deploy. So pretty soon I was known as the kiss of death. If I was leaving your unit, you could plan on deployment. So it was just unique how it worked out. A lot of great friends and great buddies and comrades I served with that did a number of deployments, and from the Minnesota Guard, 2, 3, 4 deployments from 9/11 on, and for some reason they just kept missing me.
Did you ever want to individually just go and look for an individual assignment to go on?
Yeah, yes and no. You're a part of that team, and you want to go and do your thing and contribute. And a lot of times I'll tell people it's like the pro athlete, right? If the pro football player wants to go to the Super Bowl and the pro hockey player wants to go to the Stanley Cup Finals, and for military folks, there's a high percentage of them that look at the deployment as almost like a championship. Hey, this is what I've trained for 6, 8, or 10 years, or this is why I joined, to do my part to go and serve and answer the call of duty. And so, we all have that feeling when you wear the uniform that I want to go and do my part. And still for me, some young kids at home, it's that struggle of, geez, I want to go and do this, and still have a lot of anger over 9/11, but also how is my wife and family gonna are they gonna be okay while I'm gone? So it was a little tricky to transition to the AGR program here in Minnesota. I got asked to join our recruiting and retention battalion and work with young recruits in what's called the Recruit Sustainment Program, or RSP. And I really I got into that and really enjoyed that assignment of helping get young soldiers ready to go to basic training in AIT. So yes and no. The thought came and went, and as I was getting older, you get to the point of, hey, I'll certainly go if asked, but deployed once already, and check that box and enjoy what I'm doing right now for the Army as well.
Well, again, and for those listening, as you mentioned before, some people have different sort of histories and career paths that on the surface may look like they do more than the other, but that's never the measure, right? Because everybody has their piece of the pie, and one part of the pie isn't more important than the other. The only way you can make 100% is that if everybody does their part of the pie. And so from that standpoint, obviously your service is no less, useful, or the people that you trained with and mentored, the ones that went on to combat from units that you left, all were better because you were there. And so from that standpoint, even though you're not on the ground with them, you hope and you think and you feel that those units were better prepared because of the mark that you left on them.
Yeah, and that it was actually a huge passion of mine. I was a major advocate for realistic training, and that was a big difference that I saw from when I joined the National Guard in the late 80s and early 90s. A lot of things were simulated, and the training in my mind wasn't realistic enough, coming home from Desert Storm, saying, geez, there's got to be ways that we can train our soldiers better and more realistically. And that was one of the things during my career that I was very proud of, is that I always tried to bring incredibly realistic training to the table. And just a quick example of that is, have you ever seen the model rockets that you can buy, where you build the rocket and you put the solid fuel cell in it and put it on the little metal plate and shoot it up? So in my mind, I figured out, well, geez, let's build an RPG out of 4-inch plastic tubing and shoot those at each other, like RPGs training, or when we're doing convoy ops and things like that. And the first time we used it, by then I was an E6 or E7, and we were doing some convoy training. And I'll never forget the commander and the commander's driver in the E3 were the lead vehicle, and they came around a curve, hit our blocked ambush, and so the E3 got out to try and move the log across the road. And we opened up with these RPGs on them with these model rockets, and that poor kid turned white as a ghost and ran about 4 different directions at once, and doing the AAR on it. Talking to the kid, geez, Private, why'd you get out of the vehicle, and what happened when you saw that RPG come in? And he admitted, I just froze. I had no idea what to do for it, and it kind of brought me back to that time when I was at the checkpoint. And the SCUD attack came in, and I kind of just froze watching the fireworks, and luckily I had an NCO to tell me to get in the bunker. But to me, that trying to bring very realistic training like that into it, hopefully better prepared a lot of the soldiers that were in my charge to go and deploy post 9/11, and hopefully when it came time for them to face a real threat downrange, that time they wouldn't freeze, that they would know what to do.
All right. So after 23 years, how do you know it's time to retire?
Well, I'll be very honest. The military started to get a little different. It's still the greatest force in the world, and still have the greatest war fighters on earth. But I saw a big shift in kind of what was important on the training side for at least the force that I was in, and there was more and more emphasis on spending time training your soldiers on things that were important, like sexual assault awareness and diversity and different things that are very meaningful and need to get done. But the amount of time that we were spending on these was really or it wasn't leaving us enough time to train our soldiers to fight and win on the battlefield, and so there was just a big challenge, I thought, in what the priorities were for our training time, and just decided, I'm getting to be a bit of a dinosaur here, and this charity thing's growing like good. Or growing like crazy, and just thought this might be the time for me to open a slot for somebody else to advance. And it was the right decision at the time. I think we gave the next E7 a great opportunity to move up, and I took a chance on leaving and putting full-time energy back in 2012 into the foundation. It really helped us grow to become a nationwide org that's been able to give back millions now to military families.
Well, and let's get to that, because it was called originally Defending the Blue Line, and for those listening, that's not a comment on police. When you say blue line, it is a term in hockey for those who, listen, Shane, as a kid who grew up playing hockey for 15 years, it's sad that not a lot of people know about it, but the people listening worldwide who don't know what a blue line is, well, it's a hockey term. So just wanted to clear that up, given everything that's going on in the world. But that said, Defending the Blue Line turned into the United Heroes League. Just kind of give me the idea of why you started with it. I mean, obviously, if you're a Minnesota kid, you played a lot of hockey, right? I mean, it's part of like church on Sundays, if you will, in that part of the country. So, but how did the whole thing come about?
Yeah, it's hockey's a lifestyle in Minnesota, and so I was AGR at the time in the Minnesota Guard, and I just happened to run into a couple of pro hockey players that were playing for the Minnesota Wild at the time. Unbeknownst to me, one of them had military history in his family. His grandfather had served in World War II, and his great grandfather was killed in action in World War I. So there's a guy by the name of Brent Burns that played for the Minnesota Wild at the time, and another guy by the name of Derek Bugard. But I happened to meet him by chance and was in uniform, and they kind of cornered me and said, "Hey, we want to give back to the troops. We're huge advocates of the military, and we want to use our status as a professional athlete to help military families with hockey. What's out there that we can do for organizations, or what can we do for military families?" So I went back and said, "Hey, I'll find something and let you know." Well, there wasn't anything out there, so literally that night I just kind of decided, well, I'm going to start a military nonprofit to help military families with hockey, and I'll get these two knuckleheads that play pro hockey to help out in some capacity. So it was just kind of a spur of the moment decision overnight, just to decide, hey, if something good comes out of this and I can help some of our soldiers here locally in Minnesota, that'll be great. It will be a win.
So it starts with a simple idea, but nothing is ever that easy. How do you get the thing off the ground?
Yeah, I think I've just been lucky, to be honest with you. It's a lot of hard work and a lot of hours and things like that too. But we had some lucky breaks, and early on we had those pro athletes that wanted to help, and we started hosting families in a box suite at the hockey arena in town to watch them. And then pretty soon we got some equipment donated and we're turning around and giving that to families. And so really the first 2 years it was pretty low key. 2008, 2010, we sent some families to game and helped out with equipment and paid a few grants to help those E4s, E5s help pay for the high cost of hockey. And then 2010, things kind of started to shift. I got a call one day, and I was actually just coming off the ice myself. I was in the locker room after skating, and it was a producer from NBC Nightly News saying, "Hey, we heard about your organization. We'd like to feature it on NBC Nightly News." And my first reaction was, "You're joking, right? Who's pranking me?" I figured it was one of my soldiers that set up some prank or something, but sure enough, we ended up being featured in prime time with Brian Williams on NBC Nightly News, and from there things really kind of started to take off. And 2011, 2012 time frame, we had been notified that someone in D.C. or at the White House had seen that clip about us, and they wanted us to submit to be considered for the Joining Forces Community Challenge, which was a White House initiative for military nonprofits. And so we ended up sending in our application to be considered for it, and somehow we ended up winning it. So we were the 2012 Joining Forces Community Challenge Nonprofit of the Year, selected as the best new military nonprofit in America. So it was cool to go to the White House and accept that award. But kind of the cooler thing coming out of that, as we started to meet and make some connections in D.C., we got an invite from the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff to bring one of our pro athletes with the chairman and go visit the troops all over the Middle East for 10 days during the holidays. So that was kind of my 2-week cool guy period in life, flying on Air Force Two and traveling with the chairman and these celebrities to go visit the troops, and it was very surreal to be with that group looking out on the troops as they were doing entertainment or signing autographs and things, and just kind of dawns on you, geez, I used to be on that other side of the handshake line here for a long time. But it was an amazing experience. I've done probably more cool things with the military since I've retired in the capacity of United Heroes League than I did in 23 and some change years actually in the Army. So on that trip, we got to land on an aircraft carrier in this crappy little prop plane called a SCUD. We flew out with the chairman and these celebrities on this little prop plane and landed on an aircraft carrier just like the jets do. Visit with the sailors on the ship, and then we left and got shot off with a catapult just like the jets do. And it was funny because the pilot knew I was a military guy, and he knew I wasn't big on flying. And he told me, "Don't worry, Top. If it goes bad going off the catapult, we'll be pieces in the ocean before you even know what's going on." So that was very reassuring. But that trip was amazing. We went to Kyrgyzstan, we went to Bahrain, we went to Ireland. We landed on the aircraft carrier. We went up into Afghanistan and hit the two big bases, and then we went fob hopping in Black Hawks for a couple days to all these little remote outposts, and had a very sobering moment on those. We landed one morning, early in the morning, on a pretty remote outpost in Afghanistan, and they had us go in and eat breakfast with the troops, and so I sat down next to a pair of E3s and had one of the pro hockey players with us, and you start to chit chat, and it's kind of a dog and pony show in a way, but talking to the E3, it looked like he had just been put through the ringer. You could tell something was wrong, and he finally told me, "Hey, sorry, I'm not super social this morning. We were out half the night picking up body parts from one of our squads that got hit." So pretty tough times, and you're out there and you hear something like that, and I had just retired. It makes you want to put the uniform back on again and pick up a rifle and fall back in line to go even the score, so to speak, against those folks that are doing that to our men and women. But amazing trip, and kind of coming out of that trip in late 2012 over the holidays, we were beginning to evolve more and more into a national program.
Where is the program now, and sort of what's next?
So we're still based in my hometown, tiny little Hastings, Minnesota. We run our entire operation out of our facility here. We've got a couple $1 million worth of sports equipment on hand that comes in and out every day to military families. We're in 24 markets around the United States, so places like DC, Southern California, New York. We do a lot around Fort Bragg, different markets all around the U.S. We have teams of about 10 or 12 regional volunteers and a regional program manager that it's usually military folks that volunteer their time during their non-duty hours to help advance our mission and distribute benefits. But today we're doing 2020. We'll do $3 to $5 million in charitable giving to military families across the country and really around the world, and continue to grow. We're trying to strategically grow the other sports. So 2016, we decided to rebrand and change our name from Defending the Blue Line, which was very hockey specific, to become United Heroes League, and opened up a plethora of other sports, so we can help families now with soccer and basketball and football and golf and different things. So we continue to grow those programs, and pretty excited for our future. We're 10 years in now, and growing like crazy. So it's going to be a great legacy to leave, and very confident the organization will live in perpetuity to help military families bridge the gap for the high cost of youth sports.
So let me ask you, you've been at this for 10 years. And you mentioned legacy, do you feel like more of your legacy is the United Heroes League as opposed to the actual service?
I think so. I'm super proud and grateful to have been able to wear a uniform for as long as I did. Love serving my country, and we'll see if one of my 4 boys continues that part of our family tradition. But I think the organization, United Heroes League, has been able to have such tremendous impact on our force as a whole, and especially their families. I would say that I've been more proud of the accomplishments that we've had here, and I'll give you an example. There's a special forces soldier in Southern California that we were lucky to be able to help out. We had gotten an equipment request for him, and a grant request, and so we shipped off some goaltender equipment for his kid, and paid a grant to help keep him in hockey. Well, a few months later, 3 or 4 months later, I get a very nice thank you letter. I didn't know it. I had no idea at the time, but Wade, when they put that request in, was actually recovering. He had been shot 9 times while he was rescuing a hostage in Afghanistan. And he lived to tell about it. His body armor picked up 6 of the rounds, and his body got the other 3 rounds in his hand, and a couple of them in his arm. But it's been, to be thanked by somebody like that, that's holding a Bronze Star and a Purple Heart, and paid a pretty heavy price for going over and doing the things that we need to do, has been incredibly rewarding, and those families stay in our program for a long time. And in fact, that soldier's son recently signed a contract with a minor league hockey team, a NA3 team out in California, and I think we just shared it on our social media here in the last week. His son Liam, that we were able to help young when Wade was going through a tough recovery period, flourished, and that family, their thing to rally around during recovery was hockey, and very fortunate and very proud that we could help make that possible.
Just out of curiosity, do your kids participate in the United Heroes League?
Yeah, I've got 4 boys. They've all been goaltenders, and I'm too poor dude to be able to afford 4 goaltenders. So they've been lucky to be able to have the opportunity to use equipment. And to be honest, they've been very spoiled in that they've gotten to meet a lot of the pro athletes that are ambassadors for us. So. It's been great and great for them. I've got 2 of them are graduated now, and 2 of them are still in school. So a couple more years, and we'll run out of goalies.
Right. I asked that because I'm just curious if your kids or any of the other youth kids who are part of the league, ask you about the military and tell you that they want to sign up. Do kids from your league, when they get old enough, end up going into the military at all?
Yeah, it happens all the time. We've had kids in our program. We've been around long enough now to where some of those kids that were 10 years old and getting a pair of skates from us are standing in a formation now in the Army or Marine Corps or other service. So it's pretty cool to see that come full circle.
I mean, it must be. Some of those kids might have even deployed again already, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's just you guys know what the military's like and the brotherhood and how close knit it is and how many of those families where their kids continue that legacy, and just very proud to have been a part of it.
Well, look, it's an amazing foundation, and you talk about the growth, as you mentioned, in 40 states. It's unreal that an organization continues to grow like that, and it's serving all the right people. Military youth and those families that need the help. And I mean, I wonder how many Gold Star families do you know that you're dealing with, as far as kids who have lost a parent?
Yeah, we've got probably about a dozen Gold Star families in our program, and it's been an incredible journey with those folks to hear from the surviving parent what a difference we've made by being able to keep their kids engaged in sports and keep them in front of positive role models and coaches for those sports. A lot of times those coaches kind of fill a gap for that parent that was lost, just from a role model standpoint or somebody positive to have in their life to help them make good choices and help them heal and move on and be productive people. So we've got some stories like that as well, and boy, those are always the first folks that we want to try and help.
Again, just an amazing foundation, an amazing organization, and leadership at the top is where everything starts from, Shane. And you're a huge part of that. And as we talked about with legacies, I think just from listening to you again, part of your legacy as a soldier, it was left on those who, after your time in Desert Storm, went on to go fight in the global war on terror. And now you're leaving a whole new legacy with the youth across America who are taking part in the United Heroes League. And not only that, again, enlisting in the military or signing up to do ROTC in college, whatever it may be. And from that standpoint, it's, the reach just continues to grow. Like, are you ever amazed at the strength and the arm and the reach that your program has?
Yeah, I never in my wildest dreams thought it would grow this big. And when it started creeping outside of Minnesota, tried to start being smart about, hey, well, what happens if we continue to grow, and what does it look like on a national level? And it's just been funny, some of the things over the years. One of my favorite stories is 2 years ago, I got a phone call from a SF buddy that was at some little crap hole outpost on a mountain in Afghanistan, and called me on a satellite phone and said, hey, dude, like every time we try and leave the wire here, the locals and the kids are throwing rocks at us whenever we try and get off this outpost. Do you have any soccer balls or anything you can send so we can try and make the peace with this local tribe?
Wow.
So we packed up a dozen soccer balls and some nets and shipped them off to this little mountaintop in Afghanistan, and got a call 6 or 8 weeks later from that soldier saying, hey, dude, just wanted to say thanks. The local kids are playing soccer now and nobody's throwing rocks at us anymore. So thanks for sending that stuff over. So just some pretty cool stories over the years, and some of the giving that we do to forward deployed troops is pretty cool. And, we're up to 120 some pro or celebrity ambassadors now. We've got some country singers too, but I think we're onto something. I think it's a cool idea. I think everybody knows how important sports are for youth development, and I think a lot of folks understand how expensive it is too, and kind of the pay scales that the military folks are on. So hopefully it continues to grow, and someday there's 5 million military kids out there in America, and someday it'd be pretty cool if we could help every one of them. So that's kind of my goal with the organization, and it'll take some big growth to get there, but keep chugging along.
Well, Shane, again, just an incredible foundation, amazing to see the power that you've had over people in certain cases you've never even met. I mean, it just, when I say power over them, it's just the power to reach them and affect their lives and change their lives for in a positive way. And I think that is incredible. So again, it's the United Heroes League, unitedheroesleague.org, correct?
Yep, you got it.
And so check them out on the web, unitedheroesleague.org, and certainly get your kids involved if they're in your state. And if not, just, hit Shane up personally. He'll get He'll get it to your state soon enough, right?
There you go. You got it.
Well, certainly love talking with you. Again, an amazing story, and so proud of all the work that you've done in your post-military life to enrich the lives of military families and kids all over America. So certainly thank you for all that. And certainly Shane Hudella, thanks for being part of the Hazard Ground.
Hey, you bet. Thanks for having me on.
You've been listening to the Hazard Ground Podcast, hosted by Mark Zeno and produced by Matt Pasquarella. If you have an interesting story to tell and you'd like to be on the show, send us an email at hazardgroundpodcast@gmail.com. And if you like the show, don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review on iTunes. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.